Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast Team Preview Edition, the last Team Preview Edition for likely an entire 12 months. Great day to be great as always. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. Joining me as always is the other host, the one, the only, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. What's up, Dwain? We made it, man. Team number 32, Detroit Lions. Let's ride.
Team 32. It's a Friday. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Yeah, it's a great day, Ian. Man, and I'll tell you, like, I've slowly just gotten more and more excited about the Lions. So I'm ready for this one.
I woke up feeling good. Got a nice message from a lovely editor, Mark, just saying, "Hey, man, you're done with all 32. Hell yeah." And I was like, yeah, hell yeah. Didn't have much to do this morning. Slept in till 11, feeling good. Got my cup of coffee. I'm ready to come podcast with Dwain. And I lift my headphones up, and a freaking spider was underneath there. And it shook me to my freaking bones, Dwain. But I tell you about it before we started podcasting, and you told me that a coyote was following you back home, and it was a humbling experience, I must say, to learn that you apparently are getting stalked by coyotes. I see a spare spider, and I was the one freaking out. So
I don't like spiders either. But yeah, like we just have them out here where we live, and I went for a run. I was like in the cool down, like just walking last night. And like I heard something like over in the bushes, kind of like back behind me, probably like 100 yards, but I could hear something. And I was like, I say 100 yards, probably like 100 feet. And like I was looking, at first I thought it was a dog, but we've seen coyotes out here before, and he was just kind of like tailing me. And so I was starting to look at trees and shit. I was like, if this thing starts running at me, like, which tree am I climbing? I had my phone ready. I was about to call Amanda and be like, okay, just come pick me up. you know, but I was only like, I don't know, I was like a half mile from home. And there were some other homes right there. And there was like some mailboxes, some big like brick mailboxes from some of these people. So I had a plan. I was ready. I was gonna at first I would probably just like stomp at it, like, and usually coyotes are pretty skittish. They'll just run off.
How big are they?
Charge me. They're like a medium-sized dog. They're not huge. Like
because we've had Arian Foster and then recently Aaron Jones, these NFL running backs are talking about if they could take a wolf one-on-one. I think a coyote one-on-one is a much more reasonable ask potentially.
Yeah. I think the main thing you got to watch out is like they hunt in packs.
Oh,
like, so if there's a pack of them, like that would be much more frightening. But I was looking for exit strategies. I was prepared. I mean, even if you can defeat it, I don't want to be bit by the damn thing. I don't have to go get a rabies shot. I don't want to deal with all that. Like, hey man, I survived the coyote attack. Look at my face is all mauled in, but I killed it. I didn't want to go through that.
I love how the strategy for bears, apparently one of them, you're supposed to like get really big and start just acting crazy. And the other one's like lay there and act dead. And it's like between a brown or a black bear. Like, I need something more.
Have you seen The Revenant with
yes.
Leonardo DiCaprio? Like, that is so uncomfortable because he just lays there and does the thing, and the bear's just chomping on him. I'm like, God, like this is like excruciating. Like, it's the best option. It's the best option. It's just
like,
to let
what do I do? What do I need to do to win an Oscar? Get mauled by a freaking bear for like 15 minutes of screen time.
I think the bigger question though, Ian, is like, what's a strategy for handling lions? Like that. Like that's what we call a segue in the business.
Oh, I was thinking of like an actual lion. All right, let's talk about the ones that live in Detroit, the football players, if you will. As always, going to go through the front office changes, the roster turnover, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, where we occasionally break down what our chances are against various wild animals. But Dwain, looking at the first year of the knee-biting extraordinaire Dan Campbell's offense, we did lose offensive coordinator Anthony Lynn, went to go take the running back and assistant head coach job in San Francisco. So naturally, Dan Campbell, a career-long tight end coach, promoted his tight ends coach, Ben Johnson, to the OC role. Dan Campbell was calling plays to begin with, so I don't think there's too much of a reason to believe this offense will look too different in the year 2022. And what do we see last year? 23rd in pass play rate in non-garbage time situations, and actually 29th in situation neutral pace, courtesy of the fine folks over at Football Outsiders. Yeah, wasn't a very good offense at all, Dwain. And we also had probably the least aggressive quarterback in the entire league under center in Jared Goff. He hasn't gone anywhere. Do you really expect this offense to look all that different next year?
I think this offense could look quite a bit different because you had Jameson Williams. Obviously, he may not be ready to start the season. We had the emergence of Amon-Ra St. Brown. You had TJ Hawkinson out. You had DeAndre Swift hurt at the end of the year. So, you had DJ Chark as well. I think there's just, the potential here that, I don't know that any of these receivers will be elite, right, for fantasy. They could be really good. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown has a chance to be elite, but I think you have enough weapons that you've got multiple good options, right? And like if you look at some of the teams that are really good, and if you kind of like the thought process, like in NFL circles, like with coaches and stuff, is like called the rule of three, right? And if you've got three good weapons, like you can be really tough to defend even for really good defenses. If you only have two, you can beat bad defenses, but the good defenses will stop you. If you only have one, it's like a crapshoot, every week, unless you really scheme it up right. Like you can do it with a Devontae Adams when you've got Aaron Rodgers and you've got a good scheme, like what the Packers run. So it's doable. But typically, and for a guy like Jared Goff, that's not Aaron Rodgers, if you give him three weapons, yeah, I do think that this offense could take a big step forward. I mean, we've seen Jared Goff every year under, and this is less about Goff and more about his weapons, but I think we'll talk about Goff in a minute. But if you look every year under Sean McVay, Goff supported two top 36 options, and twice he supported two top 24 options at receivers. So now it was Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, who happened to be good players. Brandon Cooks was also in that mix a couple of times. But I think that there are enough weapons now that if they can stay healthy, the Lions could be quite a bit better on offense. And they also have a good offensive line.
Also worth mentioning, we did get 3 spot starts out of Tim Boyle, had banged up DeAndre Swift and Jamaal Williams throughout the year. There's a case to be made that they will be throwing the ball now more, because that might actually be what gives them the best chance to win week in.
What is interesting, just real quick, Ian, on that, sorry. I still think with Dan Campbell, kneecap biter, I think he's going to want to be balanced and try to win with efficiency, but that's not really different from what Goff did with McVay. People mistake that offense as being this super pass heavy offense, right? Yep. It was really pretty balanced. They still ran the ball quite a bit. They used a lot of play action. The innovative thing they did at the time was integrating play action with these jet sweep motions and 11 personnel, right? People were used to seeing that with a tight end and a fullback, but now all of a sudden, you've got 3 weapons that could be a problem, in the passing game, and your defense trying to deal with all of their run fits, right? With lighter personnel in the box. And then you had a big back like Gurley, who, great, you want a nickelback tackling Todd Gurley? Well, it didn't work out that well. We'll just put it that way. So I think there's an opportunity that it could be a more efficient offense, even if they don't throw the ball that much more. Last year, I will say, when trailing, they threw by 4 more points. They threw the ball 69% of the time. The league average is 70%. In games where it was within 3 points, or in plays where it was within 3 points, 53% of the time they drop back to pass. The league average is 60%. Right. So they're well below it. And then leading 46% of the time they drop back to pass versus the league average of 51%. So I think we could still see them try to be a conservative team. I mean, in fact, the fact that they were a 62%, 38% drop back versus run team with as many, losses that they had, they trailed the 3rd most in the league, man. Yeah. They trailed on 57% of their snaps. They trailed by 4 or more. Right. So it's a lot. So I think that could balance out, though. I think we could see we could see some more close games, maybe get a little bit more leading scripts. So even though, they may not be trailing as much, which may mean they may not still need to throw, I think they could just be more efficient. And to your point, when you have these weapons, it would make sense to want to throw the ball a little bit more. But I think they'll probably be, if we go back to the Madden playbook, I would think balanced to pass balanced, would be. I don't think they'll be pass heavy.
This was a team that, really was a lot more competitive than I think people maybe gave them credit for if you weren't watching them every single week. Obviously had the Ravens game in week 3 where Lamar had to convert the 4th and 20, and then he had the Justin Tucker field goal. Just from a pure points perspective, they were the team that should have won 5 games and lost 12 times. Instead, they went 3-13-1. So not good. Even if they were 5-12, that's still objectively bad, but maybe not just the dumpster divers as some have written them off to be. Looking at their main offseason moves, though, didn't do too much in free agency. Lost wide receiver Kadero Hodge, replaced him with wide receiver DJ Chark, formerly of the Jaguars. $10 million that is fully guaranteed. Just a 1-year deal, but with that amount of money, we'll expect him to have a starting spot in 3 wide receiver sets. Also, tight end Garrett Griffin signed a 1-year contract with the Lions to be a backup. Mentioned before, but Jameson Williams with the 12th overall pick, traded up to get him. We'll see how that recovery from the torn ACL continues to go. Dr. Evan Porras said October 13th was the first day that he thinks responsibly he would be ready to go. Not saying that's when he'll be there. We'll see what the Lions do. We'll see how Jameson feels. But just based on the usual recovery from an ACL injury, and he suffered it in January, we would expect mid-October as a likely return date. Also landed Virginia Tech tight end James Mitchell in the 5th round. A little bit interesting because the PFF draft guide really talked up how much of a receiving threat he is, and he basically just missed all the 2021 season with the knee surgery himself. So just probably would have gone a lot higher had he not gotten hurt. That said, TJ Hawkinson there, 5th round pick, not looking good for Mitchell, at least for the year 2022. So yeah, Dwayne, easily the biggest move of the offseason, Jameson Williams. And also just the fact that this was a team that didn't add a quarterback in free agency, didn't add a quarterback throughout the draft. It's Jared Goff's show for at least one more year.
Yeah, I think, with Goff, he's not a player like, and I know we'll get into more of his detailed stuff. Like, he's not somebody like you're going out of your way to target, but man, it's really easy, especially in best ball, to build stacks. I know we talk about game stacks and week 17, but like the number one way still to correlate and try to create big weeks and win in best ball or any format, DFS, right, is to have the quarterback with one or two of the other options on the team, right? You typically don't want 3 or 4. It's hard for them to all go off at the same time. Maybe over the course of the season, you'd be fine. But like with Goff, it's just, man, you could get Hawkinson, you could get, Amon-Ra St. Brown, you could get Jameson Williams. Like the two I find myself pairing the most, Ian, are Amon-Ra St. Brown and in the drafts where Jameson really falls, because it's like every 5th draft, and this happens with all the players that are injured. Like it happens with Michael Thomas, it happens with DeAndre Hopkins, it happens with Jameson Williams. Any of these players, Chris Godwin, I just wait for the drafts where I'm all of a sudden in a room where everybody's, I'm not touching that guy, he's hurt. Like, and then that's the draft. Like I pick them up in. So like, and Goff, the beauty of it is if you set it up, nobody's taking Goff. You can still get him. Like he's one of the last 3 quarterbacks to come off the board. So it's easy to build these stacks. And if the Lions do take a step forward, right, and the offense overall is better, I think the Lions stack has more upside than a lot of the others that we're dealing with late. Like I just think what their offense has done, provides some different outs where we could actually just see a better offense, right? I know that Goff is not a great NFL quarterback, but when we're talking about stacks, all you're looking for are those spike weeks.
Well, and I do think and I've talked about this with Carson Wentz basically every time we do a best ball stream, but I think the quarterback 2 tier, which basically ends right around Jameis Winston. You could even put Trevor Lawrence. I think it's like Tua, Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, all these guys. Yeah, I have them ranked ahead of the Jared Goffs and the Carson Wentz's of the world, but I do think you could argue it's a tier or maybe like, a 3A, 3B tier. And we're still talking about, in Jared Goff's case, and probably Carson Wentz, a quarterback that is going to start 17 games that we have seen be a legit QB1 over the course of an entire season before. If we can get that guy in round 16 or round 17 to actually fill a position of need on the roster, Dwayne, to me, that's better a lot of times than throwing some dart at a wide receiver or running back who, at that stage in the draft, like, it's usually either like a pure injury handcuff guy or hell, maybe even someone that's not particularly likely to make the team by the time September comes around. So I do think there's something to be said for getting a legit QB2, QB3 at the end of these drafts and not reaching on someone like Tua, legit like 6 rounds earlier.
Yeah. And again, a lot of it just comes back to the way you've built your team early on. So the beauty is if you want to take Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle, well, the quarterback also costs 2 or 3 rounds more. Whereas you get Amon-Ra St. Brown in round 6, he's creeping into round 5 now pretty consistently over on DraftKings and full PPR. I think in half PPR, he's more of a 6-round pick, so underdog, that's probably the better price. But you can get all of them cheaper. And so you're paying up for the Dolphins all the way around. You're paying up for Tyreek Hill, you're paying up for Jalen Waddle, and you're paying up for Tua. Yeah. So I like the Lions stack as being a sneaky one that could be, and we're not saying Amon-Ra St. Brown is Tyreek Hill, but I think it's a sneaky stack that at ADP could potentially pay off more, and it lets you do other things at those early picks besides taking a Tyreek Hill.
Moving right into our quarterback discussion.
Running backs, Ian, sorry.
There we go. Quarterback discussion we're already pretty much having. Last year, Jared Goff finished as a QB 23 in fantasy points per game. Before that, QB 24, 21, and 2017 and 2018, he was 11th and 9th, and hysterically averaged 7.6 fantasy points per game in 7 starts with Jeff Fisher back in 2016. Like, as bad as Trevor Lawrence, as bad as some of these quarterbacks look as a rookie, like, we can always just go back to what Jared Goff looked like and Jeff Fisher and be like, well, it can never be worse than that. And Goff at a minimum turned into, at least anyone's idea of an above average quarterback, even if it was for only a couple years stretch. So gotta feel good.
Dude, I'll never forget, Ian. Did you watch, Hard Knocks, Jared Goff's rookie season? Do you remember when he didn't know?
Not doing this 8-8 shit again.
I know, dude. No, it was with Fisher. But do you remember whenever they asked, Goff, it was his rookie season. They asked him, does the sun rise and set in the east or the west? He didn't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, you do.
Who cares where the sun rises and sets? Oh,
God. Okay. Really?
Oh, my God. That's such a boomer thing to care about. You and Jeff Fisher.
How can you not? You wake up every day on this planet. You know whether the sun rises in the east or the west, right? Like, you know which way is north and south.
I mean, maybe I can see the bright star is supposed to be the North Star at night. But what does it solve me? They didn't have Google Maps in the 1700s, Dwayne. We do. It's a useless skill.
Yeah, wake up and touch some grass, dude.
It's like handwriting. People that fall back on their good handwriting. Like, congrats on being good at something that became irrelevant 20 plus years ago.
Awesome. I'm just going to lay out on you. It's a professional move.
Okay. Back to Jared Goff here. Look, I get it. I think the best years of his fantasy career are pretty much in the past. I'm not expecting a throwback like it was 2017 or 2018, but he's probably going to finish, Dwayne, inside the top 24. He's not being drafted in the top 24. And to your point, just where he's going in best ball, I do think he could be an underrated number 2 or number 3 QB on the squad. Probably ideally number 3, but hey, sometimes drastic times call for drastic measures. And this is not a terrible offense these days. PFF's third-ranked offensive line going to the season, 21st, PFF's receiving corps rank, 13th place finish for the offensive line last year. This is an offense that could feasibly suit Goff's strengths. I just wonder if he can get out of his own way a little bit here because, my God, man, 6.8 yard average target depth, 42nd last year. Only Ben Roethlisberger threw short of the sticks more often. So I think that's the allure for Swift, Hawkinson, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, though. They are continuing to likely run these underneath intermediate routes, and that's where Goff's going to pepper the area of the field more than just about anyone.
Yeah, and I think some of this, we've seen some years from Goff where he did push it a little bit more down the field. He had some of those times with Cooks. He did it a little bit with Sammy Watkins. But really, if you think about the way that his offense was designed before, and I think honestly they're trying to replicate some of what he had, with the Rams. There was always a field stretcher out there. It's still the way the Rams offense is now. Van Jefferson, go routes all day. OBJ will run a few as well, but they don't necessarily target it a ton. Even Stafford, right? Most of the big plays come off of the play action, right? And you're hitting that deep crossing route, or you got another receiver running up the seam that gets over top of both safeties. And so Goff is a pick and choose kind of guy. He can push the ball deep. I'm not saying he's great at it. It's not the thing he wants to do all the time. But I think if Jameson Williams can get healthy, it just helps unlock everything for everyone else, right? Because he can push defenders off, vertically, and then that gives more room for Hawkinson. That gives more room for Swift. That gives more room for Amon-Ra St. Brown. And obviously he gives you a better chance of winning deep, when you have a player with the elite type of speed that he has. And if Jared Goff, you just need the threat of being able to do it. You don't have to do it all the time to make your offense better.
Sun sets in the west, right?
Yes.
That sounded right. Sounded right.
Yes. It rises in the east, sets in the west.
Running back room, DeAndre Swift, Jamaal Williams, Craig Reynolds, Godwin Igwebuike, and Jermar Jefferson. Of course, DeAndre Swift. This was one of those, Dwayne, where I came in to the article thinking I might be too high in DeAndre Swift. I know a lot of people are ready to crown him as the next big thing. And I just thought maybe looking back that in the games with him and Jamaal Williams healthy, that maybe his production was being overstated. No, man, really wasn't. Even in the 10 games where both backs were fully healthy, Swift averaged 18 PPR points per game and 17 expected PPR points per game. Yes, rush attempts, it was Swift 103 and Jamaal Williams 102. But the targets 62 to 22. I mean, Swift had the 66% snap rate. Williams was at 35%. He really was the 1A lead back and just getting so many of those fantasy-friendly targets, man. Hard to have any real complaints about Jamaal Williams taking away the production. Same thing as in Green Bay. Yes, would it be great if Aaron Jones and DeAndre Swift played 100% of the snaps and got every single touch? Yes, but if they're going to throw them the ball a lot, and in Jones's case, just able to score a bunch of touchdowns with Aaron Rodgers under center, beggars can't always be choosers. And with Swift, only McCaffrey and Fournette caught more passes than him last year, ended up tying with Joe Mixon for the 10th most expected PPR points on the season. And Dwain, like we've talked before about how his rushing numbers aren't very good at all, to be honest with you, and just him versus Jamaal Williams.
They're terrible.
They're terrible.
For 2 years, not just one.
They're terrible, but it doesn't make sense, man, because he is electric with the ball in his hands as a receiver. And we see that. I mean, he had to screen the house against the Niners, the Rams, and he even was starting to run the ball better, notably against the Steelers and then also the Browns before he got injured. So I'm willing
something to do with his processing and his vision. Like it's something to do with that. But here's the thing, like they've got a first round pick in him. They want to have a back that's involved in the passing game. So like Swift, look, he has the profile, right, to be the number one back in fantasy. Yep. Does he have question marks? For sure. Like I've got Swift right now, I'll go ahead and say like I've got Swift number 10, in my ranks, which is lower, than where he's going right now, in ADP. But it's because here's the thing. Jamaal Williams is good enough to stay involved. Like Jamaal Williams can be an every down player as well. He's not as electric, right, as DeAndre Swift. He's more of a lunch pail kind of guy, but he can do everything. He can play everything. And my one concern is if the Lions get better, there are other routes for Swift to improve if the Lions get better, right? What you're hoping for then is that he scores more touchdowns. But if we really just look at the games, I've got it pulled up right now on PFF Ultimate. If you look at the games where the Lions were within 3 points, right, or actually leading, what were the splits between the two for their snaps? 54-46. It was very close. Yeah. Where Swift just dominated was because the Lions trailed all the time. And we talked about it every week, last year with the utilization stuff. Like, look, the Lions are terrible. It's not changing because they didn't have the weapons. They didn't have a lot of the things going. And it is what it is. So DeAndre Swift's just going to be out there all the time because he gets all the 2-minute offense snaps. He gets most of the long down and distance. But in those games where it was actually close, and they were playing together, that gets rid of the games, where they weren't playing together, they both had to be active. It was a lot closer. So I do think that Jamaal Williams, is a player that, it's still going to be a hindrance to Swift, but in PPR leagues, DeAndre Swift is fine. Like once you get into half PPR, a little bit more of a concern. You get into standard leagues, you need to move DeAndre Swift down a little bit.
And that's where we can talk about guys like Joe Mixon, Javonte Williams, even, moving up ahead of Swift in half point or standard. Full PPR. It's just so hard to get away from with the, true Kamara McCaffrey-esque ceiling he legitimately has in the passing game. And to your point about the fourth quarter success, really was kind of like the Jalen Hurts version of the running back position this last year. 32% of his receptions came in the fourth quarter while trailing by 7+ points, easily the number one mark in the entire NFL, regardless of position. So, Dwain, I think our running back tiers are slowly but surely, becoming closer to each other. Not that we were ever that far apart, but we got our big six. I think I will keep Dalvin in the big six. After that, I have Fournette and Saquon, thanks to their 3-down roles. And then I think kind of in their own mini tiers, Aaron Jones and DeAndre Swift, who, based on what we talked about with the Packers and just not having Devontae, I can see Jones and Swift having very similar roles. Jones probably not being quite as game script dependent. With that said, we do see them bring Dillon at the end of games to grind things out. But I just think Jones's touchdown ceiling is so much higher than Swift, being able to have Rodgers under center. And I would take Swift ahead of Joe Mixon, Javonte Williams, and some of these other guys that I just don't think have the same sort of pass down ceiling. Are we in line with Swift before we move on to Jamaal?
Yeah, and you know how I do these. I do tiers. So I do have Mixon above Swift, but I'm never taking Mixon. I am drafting DeAndre Swift. So Mixon goes as an ADP on FFPC of running back 7. On Underdog is running back 7. DeAndre Swift's going off the board after him, one pick after him, but I pick Swift on the turn quite often. Like I'll go receiver first round, come back Swift. I'm hardly ever taking Mixon. I'm much more warm to Mixon on in a half point or in a standard league, to your point.
I'll go Mixon ahead of him in half point in standard.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think you can. But in the full PPR, and which is what I've got pulled up in front of me right now. Even then, I've just got Swift just a tad behind. But again, it's just the way the tiers work out, right? It's based on the volume that we have projected, the team they play on, everything. But the upside case, right, for DeAndre Swift is what you said. And so I have him in a similar tier. So this is the tier of you got two players that are just like what you talked about. They're going to be very active in the passing game, and Aaron Jones and DeAndre Swift. And then the third player in that tier for me is Javonte Williams. So basically, this is just a big smash upside tier. Like, I want Aaron Jones on as many teams as I can get. I want DeAndre Swift on PPR teams, and I want Javonte Williams on every type of format all the time in the third round, as much as I can get. Like, I will take as much as I can handle. So yeah, I like Swift. I'm a little lower than him on consensus, so I don't have as much exposure as some folks do. And again, it ties back to the fact that I know Jamaal Williams is a good enough player. He's shown enough over the last 2 years, Swift, in his PFF rushing grade and receiving grade. That's what's crazy. His receiving grade is also really bad. So historically, like, players that have had these really bad grades like this multiple years in a row, like, it doesn't always really work out. Like, the really good backs that we love, most of them actually score, believe it or not, they score really well in PFF rushing grades and PFF receiving grades. So I'm a tad worried that Swift is overrated. But again, it's all priced in because you're getting him in late round 1, early round 2. I think he's a great player to target at that turn.
You could argue his kind of usage projection is Austin Eckler on a worse offense.
Yes, that's exactly and that's what Aaron Jones too, but on, a little bit lesser offense than the Chargers, but you got a great quarterback. I think both of them are arbitrage plays on, the Eckler pick.
Looking at Jamaal Williams, currently going off the board, Dwain, RB 56 over Underdog Fantasy.
Love him.
I believe he's my second highest owned back so far after we're up to around 35 drafts over at Underdog Fantasy. So going behind guys like Marlon Mack, James Robinson. Who is drafting Darrell Williams ahead of Jamaal freaking Williams? Man, I don't get the obsession with the Cardinals RB3, but you know what? You keep doing you people, letting Jamaal fall down the boards even more. So looking back at last season, when Swift got hurt, he suffered the sprained AC joint. It's important to remember that Williams was actually banged up himself. He was dealing with hip and thigh injuries throughout the second half of the year, actually missed some action due to COVID as well. With that said, Dwayne, I was pleasantly surprised going back and looking at the 3 games that Williams had without Swift in the picture, just in terms of his overall touch usage. Like, the snaps weren't great. 63%, 47%, 42%. Craig Reynolds was out there plenty. But man, 15 carries and 5 catches in week 12, 17 carries and a catch in week 13, 19 touches in week 16. So he was clearing 15 easily, flirting with 20 touches every single week. No, he didn't find the end zone. And that's why if you happen to be starting Jamaal Williams in those weeks, you probably didn't come away with that good of an opinion on him. But man, Jamaal Williams, you're not going to feel good about having him in the flex. But if you just look at him, he's going freaking 40 picks behind some of these guys like Michael Carter, like Darrell Henderson, Isaiah Spiller, who I think we probably can agree none of those guys you're going to feel good about having in the flex, but they all have some very nice upside. Maybe those guys, Spiller, higher upside than Williams if something happens to their respective starting running backs. But again, Jamaal Williams is like the absolute cheapest running back in fantasy right now that you can like wrap your mind around something close to weekly flex value. And I think his handcuff potential is going underrated.
Yes, it is. Like he gives you spike week potential every week, especially if the Lions get better. And his contingent value is he's going to give you RB1 weeks if DeAndre Swift goes down. Like, it's going to happen. Like, he just has to be healthy. Like, I was glad that you brought up, the injuries, because like I had jotted some stuff down on that as well. But he's one of my highest rostered players over my last 50 best ball drafts. I've got him on 36% of my teams. So, and it's to your point, it's the ADP. Like, nobody wants Jamaal Williams. Like, you can get him in the 15th round. So what it allows you to do, let's say you start off running back, and you don't want to spend those 10th, 11th, and 12th round picks on Rashad White, Isaiah Spiller, Ronald Jones, other upside guys we love that play in offenses they're going to shoot out all the damn time. But if you start off heavy-handed at running back, you may as well go ahead and keep pounding receivers through that range, because there's a lot of young guys like Rondell Moore goes in that range. You got Tim Patrick going in that range. There's a lot that you can do at receiver and still gain access to these AFC West, NFC West teams. And then you can come back and you can get a Jamaal Williams as your RB4, RB5 on if you still want to make sure, hey, I at least want to have a couple of extra players outside my top 3. But I'm fine just having 4. If I go heavy at running back, it's like basically I'm saying, okay, I'm just going to be right or I'm going to be wrong. I'm in a best ball draft. I'm going to be right or I'm going to be wrong. If these players, here's the thing, if your first and second round picks go down, you're probably not winning best ball mania anyway, right? So it's just kind of a strategy thing. But Jamaal is the one I like. I constantly, like, he'll get to me. I'm like, I got to click him. Like, I got to click him because what you just said, like, there's multiple paths for Jamaal Williams. Number one, he could give you spike week value, or he could just split, carries if the team is better. Look, this is a top 3 offensive line. Mike Renner, PFF, he put out his offensive line rankings a couple of weeks ago. Like, they've got multiple first round and second round picks tied up in this thing now. Like, so this is a team that's going to have a chance to run the ball and be better. But Jamaal Williams, his paths, right? He could just give you spike week value as the Robin, right, to the hero Batman and DeAndre Swift, especially if the Rams improve. Number 2, what if DeAndre Swift continues to struggle and the PFF rushing and receiving grades are real and the coaches are thinking the same damn thing? They're like, we got to give Jamaal Williams more work. Like, it could happen. I wouldn't say this normally about a lot of players, but like his underlying talent profile, for Swift, it definitely has a few cracks in it. I'm not saying it's going to happen.
It could approach
downside.
It could approach what we saw in Arizona when Edmonds and Connor were both healthy, basically 50-50. Like, it's possible.
Yes, it's in the range. And then the final one is the contingency value you talked about. If Swift goes down, Jamaal Williams is going to give you upside that way. So it's a back that I feel like there's 3 avenues to them giving you value. You get spike week potential. The contingency upside is solid, right? And we're liking the Lions offense. We like their offensive line. So, and we don't talk about offensive lines a lot, but I always do look at the extremes. And so if you've got a unit ranked in the top 3, which the Lions do, like, I pay attention. I don't care so much about the middle of the road teams. I care about who has the worst offensive line and who has the best. Like, that's what really matters to me. And the Lions are in the conversation of having one of the best.
And there's obviously some player archetypes that it matters a lot more for. We didn't care about it for Najee Harris because we knew he could catch freaking 70 passes. For Jamaal Williams, who can catch passes but isn't going to have a ton of opportunities to do that behind Swift, that's huge. And for Jared Goff, who can't exactly escape the pocket, that's huge.
And that is the last part for Williams. If Swift goes down, he has shown multiple times in his career that he can be an every down back. Like again, folks, he's not a hyper explosive player, but I think the comp for him, Ian, actually, that's a great comp that we were getting last year. Remember last year, and you have already mentioned it just now. Where was Chase Edmonds going? Like round 6 of drafts. Yeah. James Conner, you could get in round 9 or 10.
Ooh.
I think this year's potential James Conner is Jamaal Williams. And I'm not saying he's going to wrestle the job from Swift, but if something happens to Swift like Edmonds and he comes in and he starts working, that's the other thing. Like, Swift could miss a few games and Jamaal Williams balls out and all of a sudden Swift returns and it's like, hey, dude, we're actually in a 50-50 timeshare now. What's up?
I've heard
it could happen.
I think the 3 good contenders for that this year are Ronald Jones. The issue is that his receiving so bad. I hate to tell you this, Dwayne, but Melvin Gordon, it's possible. God forbid.
Yeah, no, Melvin Gordon, dude. Melvin Gordon is one of my most rostered backs when I don't draft Javonte. Yeah. I'm not an idiot. Like, Javonte Williams goes down, I don't want to cry for 3 days.
And then
I want to be like, on those teams I got Melvin Gordon in the 9th round. Look at my receivers. Like, that's what I'll be saying on Twitter.
But then the third one that I think makes sense is Jamaal Williams. And again, he's going so much cheaper than all these guys. I just
love it. I feel like it's a major edge right now. Look, and I know, it's an archetype take. It's not just a player, right? It's the right team. Everything's just perfect spot, and the ADP is so good for Williams. And a lot of these guys that we're taking later, it's really hard to say they could have the every down upside if their teammate went down, right? Yeah. Like, we don't get that with Gus Edwards. We don't get that, even with like Tyler Algier. Probably he's only going to be a first and second down player. Tyrion Davis-Price. Like, yeah, we love the offense for the 49ers, big upside. He could take over some early down work, but probably not going to be an every down player. Like, Jamaal Williams is like one of the only ones. Like Brian Robinson, he needs 2 injuries. He needs 2 injuries for things to work out for him. Darrell Williams, to your point, like, look, man, I'm not sure Darrell Williams is even the dude. Like, if we,
he might not make the team,
Conner, right? And so, like, I like Darrell Williams, but he's a player I don't need to draft right now with where people are drafting him at ADP. I'll be fine if they cut, Benjamin or Keontae at the end of training camp, and they keep Darrell Williams and it's down to 3. Fine. Guess what? Darrell Williams ADP, you guys have already freaking shoved it too far up there, right? It's not going anywhere. It's going to be the same. I'll get him at the same price that you're paying today, maybe a round or 2 more, and that's fine. I'll just pay it then. I don't want to pay for Darrell Williams right now in drafts, like, just knowing that he could be cut. Like, it's just stupid.
Wide receiver room. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the alpha. Jameson Williams, whenever he will be back, we can expect to be out there. DJ Chark, Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, and Quintez Cephas, the Amon-Ra St. Brown spectacle. Dwayne, we were firmly on the sun god's. What would the sun god be like riding around in? Probably not a boat. Whatever the hell. A chariot. Let's go with a chariot.
Be a chariot.
We were front seat driving the Amon-Ra St. Brown chariot earlier in the offseason. When they added Jameson, I think it caused all of us to back up a little bit. But man, again, PUP list almost seems like a more of a likelihood, if not, even a certainty at this point with what's going down. Recovering from the injury, the Lions, I think, they're trying to win games, obviously, and having that nice attitude instilled in the organization. But I also don't think they're necessarily going to rush Jameson back to, putting him out there before he's ready to go health-wise. So it's once again looking like Amon-Ra St. Brown could be the undisputed number one target in Detroit. Now, as we all saw, didn't have anything going weeks 1 through 12 before we got some injuries going. In fact, he didn't score a touchdown or have more than 70 yards in a game weeks 1 through 12. What did he do after, though? PPR wide receiver 6, 26, 6, 6, 2, and 9 to end the season. Only Cooper Kupp scored more fantasy points from weeks 13 through weeks 18. So it is a small sample size. We did have TJ Hawkinson sidelined from weeks 14 through 18, and we did have DeAndre Swift sidelined for weeks 13 through 16. And Dwayne, like you could see, particularly with the Swift being out, like how directly it impacted Amon-Ra's usage. Like they were using him for not super extended stretches, but I think he had like 16 total backfield snaps basically during the last few months of the year. He had a rushing touchdown against the Seahawks and like a draw play. They were using him on the old Texas route out of the backfield and just giving him, a lot of the stuff that would have been designed for Swift. And we also had it banged up Jamaal Williams during that point. But something you pointed out on Twitter at one point or another, I was reading through your old tweets. We also saw a shift in St. Brown's usage as an outside receiver. Like he only played double-digit snaps as an outside receiver one time before week 11. He was easily surpassing that as an outside receiver in each of weeks 12 through 18 down the stretch. So we did see him start to play more on the outside and just be featured as the every down receiver that we obviously saw put together a lot of points. But here's and this is why I'm continuing to be really high in Amon-Ra St. Brown, Dwayne. We don't see guys put up these numbers and then fall back to earth. It just doesn't happen. And you can say Hawkinson and Swift were out. I agree. It had something to do with it. But I went back. I looked at wide receivers with at least 5 20-point PPR games in a season since 2010. Amon-Ra had 5. A bunch of guys have more. But there's a list. And it's going to take me a minute here. But here are the 66 wide receivers that have accomplished this. A.J. Brown, A.J. Green, Thielen, Allen Robinson, Cooper Kupp, Andre Johnson, Calvin Johnson, Antonio Brown, Brandon Cooks, Ayuk, Brandon Lloyd, Brandon Marshall, Ridley, Godwin, Devontae Adams, Hopkins, Debo, Demaryius Thomas, Deshaun Jackson, Devontae Parker, Dez, Deontay Johnson, Doug Baldwin, Dwayne Bowe, Emmanuel Sanders, Eric Decker, Golden Tate, Greg Jennings, Chase Claypool, Juju, Jarvis Landry, Jeremy Maclin, Jordan Matthews, Jordy Nelson, Edelman, Julio, Justin Jefferson, Keenan, Golladay, Larry Fitzgerald, Laurent Robinson, Marquise Colston, Michael Pittman, Michael Thomas, Mike Evans, Mike Wallace, Mike Williams, OBJ, Percy Harvin, Pierre Garçon, Randall Cobb, Reggie Wayne, Robert Woods, Diggs, Hilton, T.O., Tyler Boyd, Tyler Lockett, Tyreek Hill, Victor Cruz, Vincent Jackson, and Wes Welker. I missed a couple in there, but my God, Dwayne, it's like 2 of those guys were legitimate busts. And even then, like Laurent Robinson, he got hurt on his next contract. Like Marquise Colston was good. Jordan Matthews at least had himself a couple of okay years. Everything is telling us that Amon-Ra St. Brown probably put up a lot of fantasy points because he's probably a really good wide receiver. I know you've also done some work relative to his PFF receiving grade that shows us the same damn takeaway.
Yeah, and a lot of the same names on the list. Like since we're doing lists, so these are receivers to score 75 plus receiving grade as a rookie. Odell Beckham Jr. You guys like him? Terry McLaurin. Interest in Terry McLaurin? Michael Thomas, how about that dude? Is he any good? Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, A.J. Brown, how about him? Tyreek Hill, before he got the routes, before he really broke out as a fantasy player. Doug Baldwin, before he ever broke out as a fantasy player. Chris Godwin, before he ever broke out as a fantasy player, hit this number. Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jarvis Landry, Hunter Renfrow. You guys need to stop hating on Hunter Renfrow, Tyler Lockett, and A.J. Green. And what's funny is the same people that say Amon-Ra St. Brown can't do this are the same people saying that Allen Lazard is going to be a great receiver, and so is MVS, right? And it really does just come down to 2 camps. It comes down to, and guess what? I used to be more in the other camp, but like as you learn, as you study more, and as you research more, like you start to you try to evolve. Like we all try to get better, and I think the answer really is somewhere in between, right? Which is why I created the tier process that I did this year, which really looks at okay, what's the total situation, what's the target competition, but again, the talent. Like when going back and researching this stuff, eventually the talent usually wins out. Do some players get unlucky? Yeah. AJ Brown, will he ever get to play with Tom Brady in a pass-heavy offense? Probably not. It is what it is, but the talent is still there. So Amon-Ra St. Brown checks all the boxes we want. And here's the other thing, TJ Hawkinson just hasn't shown us, Ian, that he can really be more than a low-end tight end one, right? I can easily see them prioritize Amon-Ra St. Brown in the passing game over TJ Hawkinson. DeAndre Swift, we already talked about. We like him. The overall profile is pretty sweet. He could be the RB1 overall, but he also has some cracks. He has some flaws. What if all of a sudden they just start prioritizing St. Brown over Swift? They could easily freaking do that. Oh, by the way, St. Brown's just good enough to demand his own targets anyway. So, we're not saying, folks, that he's going to get 30% target share like he did down the stretch last year. No, Hawkinson coming back is going to impact that. Swift being back is going to impact that. Jameson Williams being there is going to impact that. But at the same time, folks thinking he's just going to fall off the map, I don't get it. I think you can still easily project him for 22, 23% of the targets and feel fine about it. You don't have to be at 30%, and you can get him in the late 5th round in full PPR. You can get him in the middle of the 6th round in half point PPR. In standard leads, maybe you dial it back a smidge, right, on St. Brown, because for him to be big in standard leagues, you are going to depend on, we need the Lions offense to take a step forward, right? So that he can score more touchdowns. Yeah. So that has to be the equation for standard leagues. So if you want to fade him a little more in standard, I think it's fine. But in half point at his price tag and at full point, in his price tag, I get him, and he's sneaking up now, man. I used to get him in full point in the 6th round, and now I'm sad because he goes at the end of the 5th. He's moved 6 or 7 spots in the last week. And so people are starting to warm up to St. Brown again. So, but I still love the price tag. A 5th round draft pick for what we saw at the end of last year. I'm all in on Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Wide receiver 30 at Underdog Fantasy. He's my wide receiver 25 right now. I am straight up taking him ahead of the guys in front of him: Chris Godwin, Darnell Mooney, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Rashad Bateman. I want St. Brown out of that group. And as always, if you're playing ADP and you think Amon-Ra is going to be there for you in the 6th and you want to take Bateman first or something, that's fine. It's a tier of them. But again, Dwayne, he's been better than these guys. Amon-Ra St. Brown last year is better than anything Darnell Mooney has ever been, better than anything that Bateman has ever been to this point. I know he was hurt. I'm not here to shit on Bateman, but in the targets, I think are pretty even potentially for all these guys too. So when we have a really damn good receiver with a quarterback too, okay, Goff, I think we would put him in the we're not thrilled about having him as our fantasy quarterback bucket of guys, but out of that bucket, man, Goff has enabled a lot more fantasy relevant wide receivers. He threw 8 touchdowns to Sammy Watkins in 1 year. Mahomes threw 8 to him in 3 years. Get Goff at least credit for one thing. That's enabling some of these fantasy relevant wide receivers. Same thing with Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, no, you hit it. And I mentioned it earlier, every single year he was a Ram with McVay, not his rookie season with Jeff Fisher. But after that, with McVay, every year he supported 2 top 36 wide receiver options in fantasy. 2 of those years he supported 2 top 24s. So Goff is going to be good enough. And again, the Lions trajectory is up, man. I'm kind of digging the coaching staff at this point, even though, I know they may not do all the analytic stuff that everybody loves, but there seems to be some inspiration, right? They seem to be a team. We've got the offensive line. There's just a lot of things working for the Lions right now. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the Lions, really surprise people. If they'd be a team I'd want to bet an over on, right? Typically on over-unders, I'm betting unders. They're just the better bet. But the Lions are one that I'm looking at right now. They're only projected for 6.5 wins. I think there's a good chance that they beat that, especially looking at their schedule. They don't have a loaded schedule. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, what do you think is his worst? I think he has wide receiver 1 upside, not wide receiver number 1 overall, but I think that he still has the upside to sneak into the top 12 in PPR especially. And I think his downside, man, in PPR,
wide receiver 3.
Worst case, you get a low end wide receiver 3. And so that's the beauty. I've got him in my tier 3A. I've got him ranked 25 overall. He's going 30th on FFPC. Thanks, Fantasy Mojo. Going 30th on Underdog. I guess we'll just thank Hayden Winks. I know, Hayden, you don't necessarily do that, but we just love you. But looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown, with you, I'm well above consensus, but he's one of the few players that you look at in the tier where you're like, man, his floor is kind of still in the tier. We've got him as a wide receiver 3. So you're getting to draft him at his floor, but his ceiling is much higher. I think you can make a much bigger argument around a floor for all these other guys: Gabriel Davis, Jerry Jeudy, Juju Smith-Schuster, DK Metcalf, Elijah Moore, Darnell Mooney, Devonta Smith, like all those guys, I see potential. Any one of those guys, I think, could have even a lower floor than that. Like Metcalf's probably going to come through on his talent alone, but good God, like the Seahawks are terrible. So yeah, I'm going to draft as much as I can of Amon-Ra St. Brown.
It's like, yeah, everyone, we're not expecting him to be the overall wide receiver 2 like he was from weeks 13 to 18. You don't have to draft him that way. So chill out about it.
And I'm not drafting Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 6th round. I'll take Allen Lazard in the 7th.
All right, let's talk a little Jameson Williams and your hatred for the
my
perception.
Love for Amon-Ra, my love for Amon-Ra and my hate of Allen Lazard's new ADP. Yes.
It never ceases to get a cackle out of me, Dwain. Okay, Jameson Williams, someone that transferred from Ohio State only because it was the one depth chart in the entire world that could maybe keep him off the field. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith, and Jigba is going to be a top 15 pick next year. Jameson goes to Alabama and just starts completely balling out. If you guys only saw him against the Georgia Bulldogs in the SEC championship, my God, like just what he was able to do, one of the best defenses college football has seen probably ever, and definitely in at least some time, truly amazing. So this is what PFF's draft guide, courtesy of draft expert Mike Renner, had to say about Jameson Williams. Where he wins, speed. Williams is a home run threat from anywhere with the ball in his hands. His combination of speed and yak ability for a 6'2" receiver is rare. What's his role? Deep threat. Williams is still not your true X receiver you can trust to win possession routes. He's your vertical route specialist. You can also take screens, jet sweeps, etc., where he can improve muscle mass. Putting on some muscle will go a long way for Williams. He doesn't play timidly by any means, but he doesn't have the play strength to enforce his will at the catch point. Again, Dwain, based on this ACL recovery, looking like October 13th, let's see what week that would kind of be. Looking like, I think
should be like week 5 or so.
The Lions have a bye in week 6, so I would say the best case,
week 7.
Best case earliest will be week 7 at our Dallas Cowboys. Where does Jameson fall? Where does Jameson fall for you with that in mind? So it's basically like, coming back from the injury is different than a suspension, but we're kind of projecting the same amount of games for him as, say, like DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar. Now, we know that DeAndre Hopkins should be fully healed, right?
That's the difference. Yeah,
that's the difference. So with Gallup, with Jameson, with Chris Godwin, right? We could have lingering effects. We don't know for sure. Every player ends up responding a little different, right? But the overall research says that these players are usually not quite back to being the same player in their first season back, right? So we could be that could cause some problems, for Williams. And I think, the Lions have Chark if they need him. Like DJ Chark has at least had one good season that we can point back to. But I love Jameson Williams because, again, I never have to draft him even at ADP. It's always a draft where it's people just like, I ain't taking no guy that's injured, ain't gonna play 6 weeks. And I'm just like, okay. I don't know why I make that voice like some farmer sitting on a tractor. I ain't taking no Jameson Williams, Ian. But it's like Jimmy Fallon, go on get. Jameson Williams, you in your 6 weeks, after the bye. Jameson Williams is a player that I love targeting, man, because you don't have to, again, he slides. Even at ADP, I'm fine with him, but I typically don't just because I know there are enough drafts where I don't have to worry about it. And as soon as I do, it's like I'll get him in around 13 or 14 and boom, turn around and come back with Goff. And a few of those, I will admit, do also have Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think I've got a couple of shares of Hawkinson, which we'll talk about in a second. But man, Williams, remember, and I love what PFF, what Mike Renner said. If you look at explosive play rate, so that is the percentage of your targets that end up being receptions of 15 plus yards or more. So that's how we get explosive target rate for receivers. Jameson Williams, number 1 in the class. But the other thing is, like, when you really look at him on his staple routes, so those are just looking at college receivers through the lens of all the routes that the NFL uses the most in their route tree, right? Just looking across the entire league over the last 3 years. And basically the cutoff is routes that are at least used 7% of the time. And it's crossing, go, hitch, ins, outs, and slants, right? Obviously, I know folks don't hit me with, what about the out and up, man? Yeah, great. But it's around like 0.2% of the time. So it doesn't even really matter. But whenever we look at Williams, like, he has the 3rd highest open rate on staple routes and the number 1 explosive play rate on the routes that the NFL uses the most. So while he did break out a little bit, he's still a young breakout, but He was obviously blocked a little bit early on, playing with Ohio State. You already mentioned it, really good players. At the end of the day, like, he's probably more polished than what people realize as well. So that's the one area where I know Renner talks about him as a deep threat and explosive playmaker. I think he might actually be ready for taking on more than that. We'll have to see how he comes back from the injury. But again, ADP is right. The ADP is right on him. And the other thing, I want to draft him now, Ian, because there is a chance we get into camp and they're like, hey, Williams is ahead of schedule. Yeah. And if that happens, his ADP is going to push to round 11. It's going to push to round 10. And then we're still going to have to worry about, could he have a setback? And there's other players you may be looking and targeting in those rounds. So I like getting my exposure. If you guys are out there drafting best ball, like, now is a good time to go ahead and get the exposure to Williams.
Wide receiver 60 off the board. I feel like he was going a good 10 spots higher than that not that long ago. And at that point, no. But to your point, now, yes, that's my deep analysis there.
Next year, this is a lesson learned for next year. And I don't know why I haven't thought about this more, but like, we should be way more all over this injury stuff.
I agree.
Way sooner. Like, we should have already been grading Jameson Williams this way. You and I talked about this on Chris Godwin, like, off the air, I think.
KJ Hamler's another guy. Like, we shouldn't be surprised that, and it's not just us, believe me, but
there's enough information out there now with all the studies and stuff that are out there that we basically know. We don't have to be like, I defer to the doctors because they're awesome, but we basically don't have to be a doctor to know that this is the typical time frame when this kind of injury occurs. Right. And we can at least start there. And then we let the experts come in and fine tune based on the other things, right, that they're reading about it. But I feel like that's an area that I can improve on. Like, and we're fine. We're only in July and we've already adjusted for all this stuff like in June. So we're still ahead. But like, these are things we probably knew in March, right? We knew when the injury occurred. So
that's a lot of Dr. Evan Porris's process. It's just like
awesome, man.
The usual.
He's awesome.
But like, he does have certain players he's done like a deeper study into, but when we were just going through this big chunk of ACL injuries, he was just like, look, I believe it was 9 months was his, like, from start to finish, like, responsibly, that's the earliest you should expect someone to come back. And so it's just, he got hurt then, so here's his projected month back, most likely based on that figure. So yes, I agree, Dren, we can do a better job with that, and we will. DJ Chark, I've gotten him on some squads. I'm not going to reach on him. He is coming off a fractured ankle himself. Obviously, from my novice medical knowledge, it seems to me like, having the bone breaks are just easier to recover than something that is, attaching ligaments and all that. So not expecting him to be nearly as limited coming back than Jameson Williams. With that said, though, still does have the potential issues in terms of like, okay, will Jared Goff actually start throwing downfield more, or is Chark going to be running wind sprints on one side of the field? And honestly, Dwayne, I know he got the $10 million for a year, which is a lot, and I think he'll start, but with what Josh Reynolds brings to the table, Khalif Raymond, Quintez Cephas, like, these are guys that I could see rotating along the outside with DJ Chark. It's kind of like what we talked about with the Packers in terms of like, we could just see a lot of rotations everywhere with Amon-Ra St. Brown being the one wide receiver who is barely leaving the field. Again, once Jameson is healthy, I expect he'll have that treatment as well. But I think there's an underrated chance that DJ Chark isn't nearly as ingrained as his number 2 receiver as I think someone may be making him out to be.
Yeah, I'm 12 spots below ADP on Chark because here's the thing. In best ball, what is DJ Chark going to give me in the huge money weeks when by then we know Jameson Williams will be back.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like at best, it's probably a rotation on the outside for Chark by then. So the way I would think about DJ Chark would be more in managed leagues. So let's say I start off the draft running back. The rest of the room keeps pounding receivers, just punching Dwain like right in the face over and over and over, like Ian likes to try to do in drafts. And so you're sitting there, you're like, crap, I'm going to have to pivot. I got to take a tight end. I'm going to take Kittle in round 4. And then I'm going to turn around and I take Kyler Murray, whatever, in round 5, because I don't like the value. And now I'm like, okay, I've basically got everything except my receivers now. And so you could end up drafting DeAndre Hopkins, right, as your wide receiver 1. You're not going to have him for 6 weeks. Let's say you get Russell Gage. Let's be nice. You get Russell Gage as your wide receiver 1. Your wide receiver 2 is DeAndre Hopkins. Your wide receiver 3, let's say, is because Michael Thomas slips. So now you got potential upside in all these players, but you have major question marks. And so then maybe you come back in the next couple of rounds and you throw some things at Tim Patrick, right? You like the schedule he plays in. Plays on the Broncos. He's going to be on the field. Say you grab Rondell Moore because you're fine. You got Kyler. You got a double stack now with DeAndre Hopkins, and maybe Moore just gets more early on while Hopkins is out. Helps you cover for Hopkins. Then on a team like that, that's where I could see myself saying, fine, I'll throw DJ Chark on here. Maybe he gives me some production in the first 5 to 6 weeks, right, when I need it. But I'm still going to be passing on him at ADP. I don't get it. Like, he's a player that honestly is really confounding to me with why, especially in best ball, why people are taking him so high. He did have one good year. He's technically still a breakout candidate. Like, I've got him in my breakout wide receiver article, but he's like one of the lowest ranked guys with the lowest chance. But he's technically checked like a couple of boxes. I just struggle to see a way with so much target competition, and then Jameson coming back, though, that it's going to be something that really wins me a lot of dollars. So I think I would have to have a specific construction where, for whatever reason, I'm like, man, I just need help in the first few weeks. Like, I got to have enough darts, like, because on a team like that, you're probably drafting, on DK, I'm probably drafting 10 receivers. On Underdog, I'm probably drafting 8. Of course, half of them would be players that won't be in the league because Underdog receivers go so early. But yeah, that would be the construction where I would consider a guy like Chark. But I have 0 shares right now.
I think you said that very well. Have you seen Queen's Gambit, that Netflix show? No. It's about a chess player. It's very good. It's about a chess player, and she goes on to challenge the best in the world. But she starts to, I forget what drug it is.
She challenges a computer.
She takes some humans
sort
can't
beat computers anymore in chess. So
let me finish. So she takes some sort of drug or something, like steals it from her like sick dad, and basically has her like tripping out as a kid, where she's laying in her bed and she's looking up at her ceiling and she just sees the chess pieces there, and she's basically playing full games of chess with herself in the ceiling. And as you were going through an entire like potential underdog draft in your head there, I was just imagining you laying in bed, like just looking at the ceiling as like round 1.
No, I just lay in bed and open another draft, Ian.
Well,
I'm laying looking up, but my phone is in front of me.
You're basically just doing that by yourself.
I'm not gonna lie. The other night I was drafting and I had my phone up like this, and it was like 1 a.m. and I fell asleep. Bam, right in the face. Like, oh, round 13, wake back up.
Finish this draft. No time for sleep yet. All right. Last one here. The tight end room. TJ Hawkinson, Brock Wright, James Mitchell. What's up, fam? TJ Hawkinson coming off 61 catches, 583 yards, 4 touchdowns, only played 12 games in that year. Finished as the tight end 7 on a per game basis, as he also did the year before. As a rookie, was the tight end 26. I think Hawkinson is really good, Dwayne. I think he's probably a better real life tight end. Some of the things he's able to bring to the table as a blocker. Better than Dalton Schultz and stuff, but I don't think he's like in the Kittle stratosphere.
I think they're pretty close. I think Schultz, honestly, and Hawkinson are pretty close. I would give Schultz the edge.
Ooh.
I mean, I would give Hawkinson the edge in talent just because we know he does have the first round capital. Right. The NFL's not complete idiots. But at the same time, like when we look at their deep targets, Schultz doesn't get any, 5%. So those are targets of 20 yards or more. TJ Hawkinson, 6%. Now, you've already brought up Jared Goff being part of that. But Yak, 3.3. He's kind of a catch it and fall down player. Schultz, same kind of thing, as you might say, as Zach Ertz before he had yellow hair, right? And then explosive play rate. So those are, again, those receptions of 15 plus yards or more divided by your targets, only 14%, where you see a guy like Kyle Pitts at 27%, George Kittle ripping it up at 25%, Mark Andrews, 22%. Even the older Travis Kelce still at an 18%. So, yeah, I think, and that's what I was talking about earlier with Hawkinson, I'm starting to settle in that his profile probably doesn't carry the athletic upside that we once hoped, meaning, hey, I can earn targets and I can do a lot with them after. I think right now he's starting to fall into, could be in an offense where he could earn some targets, but is he going to be able to do that much additional with them? And as the target competition around him improves and the quarterback realizes, oh, there's a dude over here that can get open and also take it to the house, right? Does that mean that he's now going to see less? So I like Hawkinson. I have him in the same tier as Dalton Schultz. Like, I think that's the perfect way to go. I have him in the same tier with Dallas Goedert as well. I'm reworking my tiers this morning.
Ertz needs to be in that tier as well, I think.
Yeah, Ertz is. I have Ertz in the tier as well. So it's Dalton Schultz, TJ Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert, Ertz. Ertz, Schultz, and Hawkinson are all the same profile, pretty much. In offenses, well, especially the Cowboys and Cardinals, they're in offenses that we like. Lions are an offense we think could be better. They should be in line for targets. Schultz, a little more room for upside in the targets this year because we've got Amari Cooper gone. You got Michael Gallup's going to be out early. I actually just dropped some stuff on my Twitter timeline where I dropped a screenshot of actually all my range of outcomes for the top tight 10 tight ends in targets based on their drop back rate, the team drop back. So how often does the team pass the ball? And then a range of outcomes based on targets per route run. And Hawkinson still projects fine, Ian. Like, he's a guy that if you know, you're sitting there and it's round 7, you don't have your tight end, and say the other positions dry up in front of you, and you're like, I'm gonna grab TJ Hawkinson. It's fine. It's just not a guy that I'm going out of my way to target right now. And often because I'm taking Amon-Ra St. round the round before. I like the Lions. I think they're ascending offense. I don't know that I want to invest I'll probably do it a couple of times, but I don't know how often I really want to invest back-to-back picks with Hawkinson and Amon-Ra St. Brown into the Lions offense. I suppose there would be a scenario where I might make that happen. But so I think Hawkinson's a fine mid-tier, tight end 1. I don't think he's going to destroy you and hurt you if you draft him. Like, I think he's going to be stable. I just don't think the upside that we thought was maybe there, like going into last year in year 3, I think we've seen enough now to know that bull case is probably not there.
To me, it's like Zach Ertz is going 2 rounds later. I'll settle for that, and I'll take someone like Trey Lance or freaking Ayuk or Tony Pollard at that point in time. Kareem Hunt's going a few picks later than Hawkinson. So, yeah, but I think you just threw us out like in a different positional discussion, but it's like he's a low-end tight end 1. We've seen it. It's only been 3 years in the league, but again, just when I look at his overall stats, which I try to do here using multiple things, not just the PFF grades, try to look at the whole picture, but 68 tight ends with at least 50 targets since 2019. He's 14th in PFF receiving grade, 20th in yards per route run, tied for 33rd in yards per reception, 14th in targets per route run. He's really good. I don't think he is a top 5 receiving talent at the position. And I was trying to be nice about saying he's better than Dalton Schultz, but I think you're right. Like, they really are a similar type of player. Like, I think Dallas Goedert gives you more downfield ability and yak ability. Yes.
And Goddard, like, is kind of he's a different, even though he's in the same tier, he's a different archetype of player.
Yeah.
Goddard, if he played on a team where we knew he could get the targets, like I think Goddard carries out of all these guys we're talking about, like Goddard, say he has a teammate that goes down, Goddard's the one with the upside. If AJ Brown goes down, right, and the Eagles decide not to remain, rush heavy, like if all of a sudden they're kind of not like they were the first 4 games, throwing the ball 70% of the time, but let's say they're at least like 60%, right? Not like 50. If they were a 60% pass team and it was just Goddard and one other player, Goddard would be ranked right behind Kittle. He would be ranked ahead of Schultz and ahead of Hawkinson instead of in the same tier with them, just a couple of spots below. But if you're a true upside drafter and all you care about is the upside, I think Goddard's floor is potentially a little bit is lower than Schultz, by a little bit. Not as much as people may think. Again, you can check it out. I put it on the timeline today and you can go look at it. But like the upside for Goddard, like if the contingency value hits and you're trying to actually have a pick that could make a difference, and maybe help you win your league, I think Goddard is still the path to go in that range.
It's a great point and makes me want to move Goddard from tight end 9 to tight end 8. I do have Ertz ahead of both, and then Schultz at tight end 6. I understand because Ertz does have the lower ADPs. If you want to rank him lower and just not really force yourself to reach on him in the course of a draft, I get that. But
Goddard and Ertz are pretty close on Underdog, 71 and 78. But to your point, like Schultz is on FFPC is 44. Now that's tight end premium.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's tight end premium. And that round, like I'm not spinning the pick on Schultz, but on Underdog, Schultz is 67. Hawkinson is 85. Goddard is 97. Ertz is 109. I'm just not going to have much Dalton Schultz. I think people are reading way too much into vacated targets. We care, and it's in his range of outcomes. It's baked into his rank here. I have him as the 6th tight end, which is where he's going. The difference is, right, that people are taking their 6th tight end off the board way sooner than what I would.
Yeah.
In the overall scheme of where so he's going pick 67, man, on Underdog.
He's closer to Kittle than he is Hawkinson. Like, that should not be happening.
There is no way I'm taking Dalton Schultz under any circumstance ever over Kyler Murray. I'm just not, man. I'm not taking him over Jalen Hurts either. Right? I mean, those 2 players, we can argue in the 6th round, could win your league for you. I don't think Dalton Schultz is going to win your league. I don't think he's going to hurt you. No. I think Dalton Schultz will be fine. You'll be like, okay, I got an okay tight end. I feel good. But I think you're also going to feel fine, to your point, Ian, if you take Zach Ertz. You get Zach Ertz at pick 109. Schultz goes at 67. That's silly.
All right, quickly recapping. Jared Goff, not someone you're going to concern yourself with in traditional one quarterback leagues, but don't underestimate what he could do as a QB2 or QB3 in best ball land, where he's just kind of being thrown at the bottom of that tier of quarterbacks. And it comes down to like, all right, Jared Goff in round 16, Tua in round probably 12 or so. I'm usually going to be fine taking more wide receivers earlier, settling for someone like a Goff or Wentz later. At running back, DeAndre Swift, Dwayne and I both have him RB10. Very fair to prioritize him in full PPR formats, half point standard. That's when we can, have bigger questions about him versus guys like Joe Mixon and Javonte Williams. Jamaal Williams, love, truly. I would say, honestly, man, our favorite, like late round running back at this point. He's just being priced so close to his floor. You can obviously see players that have his same profile as a flex with benefits that are going rounds and rounds ahead of him. So we love Jamaal Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, both of our wide receiver 25s, well ahead of consensus on there, because we don't see players be as freaking good as the sun god has been, fall off a cliff. Not expecting that to happen to him. Jameson Williams is being priced appropriately now. Don't hate the player, hate the ADP. We're fine taking that injury discount as long as he's going to be outside the top 60 freaking receivers. DJ Chark, meh. TJ Hawkinson, if he's going to be falling past ADP, okay. But right now, Zach Ertz is the one that's cheaper, and we don't see that big of a difference in them. So just go ahead, take your Kyler Murray, take your Jalen Hurts, go get another tight end that we feel like is pretty damn good in the same realm of the tier. And yeah, sound about right, Dwayne?
Yeah, man. I was excited about this team. Like I didn't, and it's one of these teams going into it when I was looking at some projections and different stuff and like modeling some different things. I don't want to say model, like I was doing some spreadsheet shit, people. I really was starting to get excited about them, and just looking at the moves and, how the team, is just, I like the way they're put together, man. I think there's a real chance that the Lions are a team that surprise us this year. I mean, it's no guarantees, obviously, but I like them. One other thing I'll say just real quick, like quickly on the tight end thing, so, and if you go look at my tiers, which for tight ends will go up on Monday, they're already up. You can see the old one, but I'll have a refresh version on Monday. But again, in the tiers, like I put in there, like the expected dropbacks for the team. So, right, how often they're going to pass, like how good do we think the quarterback play is going to be, target competition, all these different things. And what's interesting, like with this whole Dalton Schultz versus George Kittle thing, right? Because I've seen a lot of people say, don't draft George Kittle, just wait on Dalton Schultz. Number one, before I even get into this, let's just take fantasy points scored per target. Like they're not close. Okay, folks. So a target to George Kittle is not the same as a target to Dalton Schultz. Those targets, the value of that target is different. Because George Kittle, as you like to say, Ian, I think is really the best way to sum up George Kittle. If the if the Earth was invaded by aliens tomorrow and we had to push a tight end forward to save the rest of planet Earth to play on our football team, George Kittle would be our pick.
Yep.
But what's interesting, I have George Kittle, I have the 49ers, and I actually lowered their pass projection this morning because I feel a little more confident it's going to be Lance. I think I want Jimmy G off the roster. For the sake of Lance drafters. But at the same time, like I've got him at 32.8 projected dropbacks per game, the lowest in the NFL, Ian. I'm also accounting for Brandon Ayuk being in the picture. I'm accounting for Deebo Samuel being in the picture. Dalton Schultz, I have the Cowboys projected for 40.9 dropbacks per game. That's 695 versus 558, a difference of almost 150 pass plays, Ian. Do you know that because of George Kittle's targets per route run, even in games played with these other dudes, he still projects higher on his floor for targets and higher on his ceiling for targets than Schultz? And the way I work these, like I gave Schultz actually, so Schultz, his routes run per dropback last year from week 9 on, when he basically became the lead tight end, was 78%. So that's his median, right? But I gave him an upside of 90% routes per dropback just because like they don't, it could happen based on the team. Most players, I won't do that. Most players, it's like I'll be 5% one way, 5% the other, like, and you got the number in the middle. So Kittle, is 80 to 85 to 90. The interesting thing about Kittle, Ian, is we hear people all the time saying like, George Kittle, man, like he stays in the block too much. You guys know he doesn't.
No.
You think he does because he absolutely obliterates people on run blocking whenever the team is running. Newsflash, all tight ends block when it's a run play, folks. So he does not stay into pass block. Did you know that in games last year where George Kittle played at least 10% of the snaps, because I wanted to get rid of games where he was hurt, I could have even made it more to get rid of games where he left early, but just doing that alone, getting rid of the games where he didn't play at least 10 snaps. So basically he was in the game, and you look at his routes run per dropback, 85%, the same as Mark Andrews, the same as Travis Kelce. We just need George Kittle to be healthy. Do you know that George Kittle already has a plus 30% target per route run season on his resume? He's already got a 28%er as well. He's thrown up 24%ers with two other really good players in the offense.
Bro, and he's the best. He's the best yak tight end in the league. Like, you're telling me Trey Lance can't throw him a little play action dump off? Exactly. Like, that's all we need.
Exactly. And so look, the floor I have now, this assumes Kittle plays all the games. That's where you could ding me on this and be like, well, but at the end of the day, I'm willing to take on Kittle's injury risk because the upside when he hits, right, versus Dalton Schultz. And they only go around apart, to your point. So ADP is also part of the equation. But I have the floor, absolute floor, meaning Kittle only runs 80% of the routes. For whatever reason, they're like, well, we're not going to have you out there 85% of the time. We'll make it 80% of the time. And they only throw it to him 22% of the time he runs a route, right, which he was above that last year. So that's a downgrade. 98, that is 98 targets. For Dalton Schultz, even though this team's going to throw the ball way more, has less target competition, his targets per route run are not near as strong, right? And you still have to earn targets because the defense adapts. Anyway, all that stuff we've talked about before. But his floor is 71. I've got his ceiling, giving him a 12% boost from his average last year at 90% routes run per dropback, which is, I'm giving him, more than I give any other tight end in the model, 138. Kittle's upside, 151. So Kittle beats him on floor. Kittle beats him on upside. Kittle's targets are worth more per target. So look, yes, these things all matter, but you can't just throw it out there. Well, the team runs more. Well, they got, it's all in the tiers. Like, I care about these things. They're all, I put them all in there, but I go through this kind of exercise, as I'm building them to say, okay, well, what does it really look like? Because George Kittle's talent profile is so elite. Like, it just overcomes basically everything. And for me with Kittle, Ian, and I know we're going over, but I had to get this out. The thing with Kittle is he still has tight end 1 overall in his range of outcomes. Like, Dalton Schultz just doesn't have that. Like, Kittle can give you that kind of year where you look up and you're like, wow, I had like an extra wide receiver 1 on my team. Right? Am I saying that's likely? No, but I think he still has a really good shot at top 3. And I mean, he just has the upside to give you that 16, 17 points per game. I think Schultz will be nice, right? He can give you that 12 to 13 points a game and you'll feel fine about it, but he can't give you that true lift if things go right. And that's what Kittle can do. And I've had several teams, man, even on Underdog, where people just dare you to not take, the receivers because they're going to just keep pounding you, where I have started runner, especially in a half-point PPR, where look, the top 3 outcomes almost always go to running backs. And if you get them right, you could smash. And I'll come back, and because everybody's still taking receivers, it's fine. In round 4, I'll grab one, whatever receiver falls to me. And in round 5, I take Kittle. And then coming back in round 6, I take Kyler. So I'm 6 rounds in on Underdog. I only have 1 wide receiver, but I have everything else done. And then I just plow away at the receivers.
So are you Kittle over Waller now? Like we yelled about?
No, I like both. I love both. Both.
You love Kittle more than Waller.
Kittle. Yeah, Kittle.
Yes.
Kittle does carry more upside than Waller.
Yeah, he does.
Yes.
Yeah, he does.
He does carry. So with Waller, like when you look at Waller, because I did the same thing. I did this, for all of the tight ends because I'm reworking my tight end tiers today, and so I need to go back and do this. So the median projection for both of them, that's where Waller comes out slightly ahead than Kittle, but Kittle's upside projection is still bigger. There's still both 2 great tight ends to take. I love taking both of them in round 4. If I'm drafting from, the opposite end, like 9, 10, 11, 12, a lot of times I will take Waller, and I'll take Devontae Adams, and then I'll come back in the 4th round, I'll grab Waller, and then 9th round, I'll grab Derek Carr. So I set that stack up. When I'm on the other end, I'm drafting like picks 1 through 4. I'm much more often getting Kittle. I probably do, though, need to at least a few times. And this is another thing we can talk about on our draft strategy. I know, like, typically you don't want to reach past ADP, but I think in a scenario like this, like say you've built 10 teams, where you've taken Waller down at these end picks and you've got some different, mix and match stuff that you really love. Like, I think there's a reason, even though you may reach by 10 or 12 picks, there is a specific reason why you would want to say, okay, I'm going to build a very similar build this time, but I'm going to do it with Kittle and Lance, right? Instead of Carr and Waller, right? Or just Kittle. You don't even have to have Lance, right? So that's something I want to do more of. If Kittle, sometimes, man, he's one of my favorite picks. Sometimes you'll let him go. If you're picking in the middle, I love the middle so much because sometimes Kittle will come back around in round 5 to you in the middle of round 5, coming back. Like Waller, if you're picking the middle, sometimes makes it to the middle of round 4. He's typically an early round 4 pick. Every once in a while, Waller will slide all the way to the end of round 4. And so I've gotten some exposure to him that way. But man, when Kittle comes back in round 5, like I'll go ahead and take him and then just see if I can let Kyler fall back to me in the 6th. And I've had it work like multiple times. I will say people are warming to Kyler. Yeah. The last like 10 drafts, I haven't gotten him, which I'm kind of like, oh, what's going on? I need Kyler, but it's good. It's making me, if he goes down, like I need this, like I have to diversify something.
It's like with Ertz, man. Like I always had him or Gronk. Just, hey, if we don't get a tight end before now, we'll get one of these guys. And obviously we lost Gronk. Now Ertz is starting to slide up more and more as well. Still affordable, but got to be on our, up and up there. Dwayne, we've done it. All 32 team previews have come and gone. You all can continue to listen to them. Go back and listen to an old one if you like this one, or not. We'll still have more new content coming your way. Going to be looking at doing 4 shows per week here for at least the next 4 weeks. Dwayne and I are going to start doing some redraft streams where we're actually going to be taking, some high stakes action, as the kids call it, Dwayne, trying to go take down some championships. And then we're going to have, going back to just more segment style shows. Next week, we want to do a catch up show, talk about the Baker Mayfield trade, things like that. On Monday, want to be looking at, perfect draft strategy, depending on your position. And then I have a little something up my sleeve in terms of looking at the handcuff index around the league with a bunch of these running backs. Hopefully handcuff
index.
Well, let's find guys.
I want to see how Jamaal Williams grades out.
That's what I'm saying. I have a good feeling that he's going to be one of the better, more clear handcuffs, and we're going to see that ADP and be like, you know what, everyone should be drafted.
In the index, do you put in?
I basically tier the if every single team's starting running back got hurt, I then tier where we would be ranking the other guys.
Oh, I love that. And so obviously, guys that have every down ability move up. Guys that are on less crowded backfields, first you got to be the clear cut handcuff. Then 2, like what would your role be if they went down? How good's the offense? Dude, can't wait.
Great day. Should be great. So yeah, everyone, hope you have enjoyed these team previews. Hey, if you did, I don't know, subscribe, give us a like, 5-star. I think it's annoying as hell when hosts ask for that, like every single podcast. But you know what, Dwayne and I out here working hard. If you feel the need, if you enjoy it, go ahead. I won't bring it up again. I already feel like a loser bringing it up once, but just throwing that out there. Check out Dwayne's tiers on PFF.com. And again, completed. Felt so good to finally get that done. Completed team preview series.
If you were a true pro, like you would be like, you would know where the like button is and you would be pointing to it. Like, look at me. I can't even know which way to go. Hit the like button. It's right here. It's hit this button.
Goodness.
That's my favorite.
Like, subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we have a new podcast. All this. Oh my God. All right.
No, we do enough of those. We may drive people crazy. Yes. Sorry. Close it out, Ian.
We have talked 160 minutes about real life lions and then professional football lions. Much
and coyotes.
And coyotes. This was a fun episode to end things on. For Dwayne, I'm Ian. Thanks so much for tuning into PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care.